Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today for this very special video interview with Iris Barzen. Iris helps courageous women become wild women, the most radiant, soulful, feminine version of themselves. Fiercely rooted in their feminine, wild women lead their lives with ease and grace. Iris teaches women how to intuitively create the life you want, feeling the way you want to feel on the journey towards your goals already. So thanks for joining me today, Iris, and I'm so looking forward to this conversation with you.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me. I'm really just curious to see how this conversation is going to go and judging by the past ones that we have, I have a good feeling about it.
Yeah, me too, absolutely. And we were chatting a little bit before I started recording, and I was saying that this is a call of first for me because it's not only the first sort of video interview that I've done. I've done a couple before where I've been on the other side of the interview chair, but this is the first time I'm actually, I guess semi-interviewing someone because this is more like a conversation for us. But also, it's the first time that I've done a conversation like this where I haven't set out some questions in advance. Instead, for this call, because just to give you a bit of background, Iris and I are both coaches, and we've been connecting over the past couple of months on a semi-regular basis, every couple of weeks or so, and having some really, really great conversations. And we had such a good conversation last week that I was like, I think we should sort of talk about this topic again and record it, just
Mm.
because it's been so helpful for us to talk about it between ourselves. Um, so this is actually the first time that I'm going in deliberately to a conversation like this with no questions prepared. It's all going to be ad lib, kind of going with the flow. But I do have an intention just to kind of guide the call and steer it a little bit. And again, this is something, Iris, that we were talking about before the call started. But the intention for this call is basically to talk about the topics of pleasure and permission, and specifically to inspire and encourage you watching this or listening to this to think about the role of pleasure and permission in your own life, and going forward to consider where you might be able to add more pleasure to your life, and also what you might be doing right now that is a bit of a pleasure drain, and the role that permission plays in relation to both of those things. So lots of really juicy stuff to cover today. But I thought, just to kind of get a get the conversation going, Iris, if it's all right with you, it would be really cool to talk about, like, for you, what pleasure means to you, because it's such a, I guess one of the things that I'm aware can be a bit sticky about it is it's such
Yeah.
a subjective word, and it means so many different things to different people.
Yeah. I know it can, I mean, pleasure seems to be one of those buzzwords, especially in coaching, that just sound like whatever, add more pleasure to your life. And you go, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So that was my relationship to pleasure for a long time, just going I don't know if that's up on my priority list right here. I think I just need to do the building your business, doing all the important stuff in my life first, and then maybe one day when I make X amount of money or I reach this and that thing, then maybe we can talk about the whole pleasure thing. Um, what I discovered, on the flip side, as I was, building my business, doing all that building your dream life stuff, I realized that it gets a bit dull if you don't look at, how can I feel good now? How can I feel good already? And that's pretty much what pleasure is about to me. It's just about doing small things mostly that help you feel good in your daily life, and then being really deliberate about how you add that pleasure in. So let's say on an average Tuesday, it might be, cool, I'm gonna, stop working 2 hours earlier and I'm gonna bake those muffins I wanted to bake for ages. More long term, it could be, I think I'm gonna invest in that retreat and go hang out with these amazing women because I just have a really good gut feeling about it. So that's how I see pleasure now and how I kind of practice it at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And something that we were talking about last week was the role of permission in relation to pleasure. So I was wondering if you could also share a little bit about that, because I really appreciated, um, yeah, I really appreciated the conversation we had about it last week. So yeah, for you, what is the relationship between permission and pleasure?
I think it's huge because pleasure just seems to be at the very bottom of our list, really. It's like, you know, make money, build a living, whatever, connect with your loved ones, anything really, apart from just do things just very selfishly, just to add pleasure to your life. Um, so permission is vitally important, especially in the beginning. And like as you do it more and more often, it's not as important anymore. But in the beginning, it's all about just even allowing yourself to want that, even allowing yourself to go, hey, my life is pretty good the way it is, and I'm excited about it. But I'm just looking for those little moments of delight, just those
Mm.
little moments of just feeling really good. And I'm going to start getting those moments for myself just because I want to. There's really no super spiritual reason for it, just because I really want to. And even just thinking that and then maybe saying that out loud to somebody, that is huge already.
Yeah, I think that's really, really huge, and something that I've been thinking about for myself recently is that, as kids, there's so much emphasis for us on playing, and as kids, play serves a really, really important purpose. It's how we learn, it's how we establish boundaries in relationship with other people. It's how we kind of process the stuff we're learning about the world and feel out our place in the world as well. And at some point as adults, we start hearing, oh, well, you need to be responsible and you need to get a job and you need to earn money and you need to like have a house and a family and, whatever. And there's all this sort of like serious responsibility suddenly placed on your head and all these kind of societal expectations about the way that you should be and the way that you should behave. And often within those expectations, there's very, very little room for play. And as you mentioned, I really appreciate you bringing that up, that actually for a lot of us, and I know this has certainly been the case for me, and it's something that I've been working on, pleasure just gets pushed like way, way down the
Mm-hmm.
to-do list. I was thinking as you were talking as well that a little trap that I was, I was thinking about this a lot this morning in preparation for this conversation. I realized that a trap that I've really fallen into, especially as an adult, is and to a certain extent as a kid as well, because like when I was younger, my self-worth was very much wrapped up in like achievement and how much I achieved and like what grades I got and how well I did at music and my extracurricular activities and stuff like that, which left very little room for pleasure because my sole drive for doing those things was not to enjoy them, it was to feel like a good enough person.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking this morning that I've actually lost my train of thought now. Let's move on to something else that I was thinking about, which was this need to consciously make time for pleasure.
Mm.
Because I think, again, this is a really, really big one that ties into something else something that you were saying earlier about, pleasure being quite far down our to-do list. And I think, actually, this is what I was going to say. Hooray. So I always had this belief that, when I finish this project or when I've done that or when I've achieved this goal or that grade or whatever, that, then I will feel happy. Like then I will feel pleasure and then I will have space in my life for pleasure. And I think the point is that it's not something that you get when you have done a certain number of things in your life. As you were saying earlier, it's just something that... you don't need to, like, it's not something that you necessarily deserve in the sense that you need to do certain things before you can have it. It's more something that you need to consciously make time for, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
It's more something that you choose just because you
Mm-hmm.
want to versus coming up with reasons why you can have it. But I think that's just so, so common. Um, in my head, I always just call it when then thinking. Like when I finish this project, then everything will be different because I'll have so much time. And sometimes that's a little bit true because you might just be in a very stressful time and just be super busy. But most of the time, if you don't start putting that thing in like that you want to do afterwards on your plate now and just, make a little wiggle room for it. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to take the afternoon off and just read books or whatever. You can just say, okay, cool. So maybe I'll manage to read, one chapter this week instead of just reading nothing. And I think this whole when then thing is just so classic almost. And I, for example, have been aware of it for, I don't know how long, like maybe 1.5 years, which was around the time where I started my business or I was trying to start my business. And I was super just in productivity mode. I was just like, okay, gotta make this work, gotta make this work.
Mm-hmm.
And I had zero time not even just for pleasure. I just had zero time for anything that wasn't work or wasn't researching, coaching stuff. It was just there was just no room for anything, even for relationships. Um, and that's when I kind of figured out that I really had this when then thinking going on because it was always like, oh, when I just make enough to support myself, oh, when I just make, whatever, when that happens, that'll be the big day. And then everything in my life will just change. And if you think about it, that's just really not the case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
now that I am at that place, I can just, yeah, like get sweeter when you are at that place, but it's not like somebody hands you a permission slip and goes, here you go, do whatever you want to do with your life now, especially if what you're trying to create is a life that feels really good to you and extra, especially if your business is centered around that as well. For me, with teaching women how to become wealth women, a huge part of that is just making sure you feel really, really good on the journey and you don't
Yeah.
fall into those traps. So I think this whole one then thinking is one of the first things that we just need to even just start catching ourselves when we say that and just ask, is that true? And see
Mm-hmm.
if maybe there's a way that you can just add a little bit of that pleasure thing into your life right now.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up actually about goals and kind of big achievements because, the thing about any goal, I think, is that we're so focused on the outcome usually that we
Mm.
forget to think about the process. And ultimately, if we want to achieve something, we've really got to be in love with the process as well. Otherwise, we're either not going to achieve it because we're going to get to a certain point and think, screw this, I've had enough, or we are going to be so miserable along the way. And ultimately, what life is not about achieving the goal. Life is about living that day-to-day process. Like that is your life. So I'm really, really glad you brought that up because that's like again for me in the last couple of years that's been a huge revelation, which is that it's not just about the shiny goal that you're aiming for, it's about, do you love the process as well, and does the process bring you pleasure?
Mm. Yeah, and I think most of us can see that for people who are already successful. We can totally
Mm-hmm.
see how it would just be really stupid for them to always run after the next shiny thing. But when it comes to our own lives, especially when we're in, the trenches with something, we're just starting a business, just starting a job, whatever it might be, just saying, well, I need to at least like have my basic needs covered. And until I have that, until I just make enough to pay for rent, I won't be like, there's just what is pleasure? I don't need that right now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I just want to say, even when you're in such a stage where you might go like, no, this is a serious situation. There's like, no kidding, this is really, really serious. I don't know how I'm going to pay rent next month. I just don't have time to read a book right now. Um, you even like I would say even especially during those times is it important that you do things for yourself. I spent the first year of trying to start my business, which at the time I didn't know. I was just trying. I was super convinced I was actually in business already, but I wasn't because I didn't have clients. um, for that year I was just in the whole when then, productivity. I was trying to like let go of that grip, but I didn't really know how to. And then, in the second year, that was when I really consciously went and said, you know what? This can't be it. I don't believe you people anymore who say that it has to be hard work, meaning that you have to suffer along the way, that you have to put in a ridiculous amount of hours and all that. And I just said, you know what? I don't believe that. I'm going to try to see if I can build my business while I'm working part-time a lot of the time, while I am already doing the things I want to do. So, like, kind of creating the lifestyle around it that I want
Mm-hmm.
within my means. And that's when it worked. That's when it actually started working, when I had the clear-mindedness to just slow down and figure out what's actually the next step here. What do I think is the next step versus looking out there and going, oh my God, what does she say I should do? What does she think I should be doing? And that's how I've run my business ever since, and it's working out really well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that it might just sound like, oh, pleasure, whatever, like like icing on top or something, but I think it's actually really, really vital for you to feel good, to be able to show up the way you want to show up, and also to actually reach those big goals, to do the big stuff in your life as well.
Yeah, I can so relate to what you're saying there, because that's pretty much my experience last year in 2013 versus my experience in this year so far. Exactly the same. And really, I think coming out at the end of 2013, like, I'll be completely honest, like, I was not in a fantastic place, because I was like, okay, I have worked my butt off all year. I don't
Mhm.
feel like I really have that much for show for it. And, again, going back to this process versus goal thing, I
Mhm.
was just like, I'm not having a very good time either. I know that I love the work that I do, but it's just the way I'm doing it right now is just so not working for me. And, I had sleepless nights. I had like epic journaling sessions about this. I'm really trying to work out, okay, what do I want my day to look like? What do I actually want, rather than what do I think I should be doing? And it really made me think about, something that this might sound a bit harsh, but I call the cult of busy, because
Mhm.
I think especially, if you've ever tried to start your own business, especially an online business, like, you will totally be inundated with people who are like, oh, I'm so busy and I've been working like 20-hour days and 100 hours a week and like all this crazy stuff that is just so unhealthy. And but I think it also applies to personal life as well. There's definitely, I don't know about you, Iris, but thinking back to conversations, even with friends or conversations growing up, it's like there's almost this kind of subtle competition that goes on between people, where it's like, how busy are you compared to how busy I am? I
Yeah.
bet I'm busier than you, and it's
Yeah.
almost like this badge of honor that people wear. And over the past
Exactly.
like 9 months or so, I've been thinking, like, I don't want to be in that club anymore. Like, I just
I
don't.
know.
I don't want to be in the cult of busy. Like, I
I
would
know.
rather just, like you said, take an afternoon to read a
Mhm.
book and feel okay about that, not feel like, oh, I'm doing something wrong, or I should be doing all these other things, but to really, coming back to what we were talking about at the beginning, give myself permission to do
Mhm.
that. So this is something that I also talk to clients about a lot, in terms of, the giving permission aspect. I have this thing that I call being in limbo, which is where, we know that we should sort of take time out and do stuff that's fun, but when we go and do that, our head is still filled with, all the stuff that we need to be doing, and our minds are kind of elsewhere. They're not actually in the present moment focused on having fun. And so we're kind of caught between two worlds. We're caught between the world of, achieving and being productive, and also we're caught between the world of pleasure and letting go and relaxing and having fun. And our
Mhm.
kind of physical selves are in one world, and our minds are in another world. So I call that being in limbo. And talking about it with clients, it's kind of made me realize, it's still something that I'm working on myself, and it seems to just be like a global problem at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to say a few things about, the busyness really.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, that was definitely my experience as well. And I've actually written a couple blog posts about it that, we might want to just link them up because they talk about
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
whole,
absolutely. If you send me the links, and I'll add them to the show notes for this.
yeah, like one of them is called I know you're serious about your dream. Like burnout is not cool. I know
Mm-hmm.
you're serious about your dream, but stop killing yourself over it. And I was definitely also writing that post for myself because I needed to learn that. Like it's not cool to kill yourself over your dream. It's not cool to not sleep. It's not cool to
Mm-hmm.
just be a worry ball all the time. And it makes no sense in business at all to be this person that's just frantically trying to do 10,000 things. And I think for me, really, the change came one when I was just fed up and I was just like, people, I'm done. I'm done. Like, I don't believe you anymore that I should be working hard. I'm not going to feel bad anymore just because you say you're working so hard. I'm actually just going to be sorry for you for not allowing yourself to sleep 8 hours. Um, and the other part of it was also just almost like an anger inside where you just go, this can't be it. I know there must be a better way. And then having a commitment to figuring it out, just having a
Mm-hmm.
commitment to, I'm going to get serious about finding the pleasureful way of running a business or starting a business. Um, and when you have that coupled with, this desire for pleasure, coupled with your just, I'm not going to take any more bullshit here. I'm not going to allow you to like you know, confuse me with what you're doing, and I'm not going to compare myself as much anymore. Then you really start, it's a slow learning process, but you put yourself in a different kind of path where you're walking into the direction of your dreams, but you're doing it, it's almost like you're, let's say it was a physical road, you're having time to smell the flowers, you're having times to just, go on little tangents and go see what's on the other side of things versus just going like, no, I have to like move forward really quickly and then missing the whole point of it. Especially because for me, I learned so many lessons that I know talk about with my clients through having that desire to add more pleasure and to add more ease, especially into my work life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of two things that I guess there's two directions that I'm thinking we could go in right now. Yeah, I'll go with the deserving thing, just because I think talking to clients and thinking about my own relationship with pleasure and permission and self care in general, which is really what we're talking about here. I
Hmm.
think one of the big stumbling blocks for me has been this idea of deserving. Because tied up in the idea of deserving for me is like, well, earning. You've got to earn
Yeah,
something before you deserve it. And that's kind of created this slippery slope, which has reinforced this, when I've done this, then I can have like all this pleasure,
yeah.
or whatever, then I will feel freer, then I will feel happy. The if when dichotomy. So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are about deserving, and kind of how you think about pleasure then for yourself. How do you frame it for yourself when you think about it, if you don't use the framework of deserving?
Yeah, I think for me, when I hear conversations about deserving and worthiness, I always kind of in my head, I always went like, well, I know in theory I deserve it. And no, I
Mm-hmm.
know in theory I'm worthy of it. So I'm just not going to listen. And then in reality, though, I felt like there were always conditions to me being able to do certain things. Um, and that's really the huge stumbling block because if you always have to create the perfect circumstances so that you can have your pleasure, most of the time you're just not going to get around to actually experiencing it. So the way that I think about it now is everyone deserves pleasure, and I don't care if you're a college student who's just, crying every night because you have no idea what you want to do with your life. That was me. Or if you're, a high level CEO of a really amazing company and you just don't like your business is just eating you up. I don't care if you've achieved major things with your life or not. You deserve pleasure always. It's not so much about deserving, I think. It's really about choosing. Are you going to choose it for yourself? And can you
Mm.
choose it for yourself now? Or do you have to, create all these stories around how you don't deserve it and how, you should really get that business off the ground first? You still have the same amount of deserving. It's just that you're not getting around to experiencing it because you, like in your head, there's all these blockages that you're free to just let go of.
Yeah, what really struck me then is what you said about choosing.
Mm.
And I was thinking that, I guess, rather than deserving it, it's more like a fundamental need that we all have. And that's where the choice comes in, is we can either choose to meet that need for ourselves, or we can choose to neglect that need. In which case, we're probably not going to have, the best experience of life and what we're doing as we could have.
Yeah. And I think for so many entrepreneurs, for so many people in the personal development and just create an exciting life field, it really contributes to you feeling like a fraud when you're sitting behind your laptop 24/7 just trying to do all these busy things for your business, looking back at your day and then going, oh, I'm not sure if I made any progress on top of all that. And then, writing a blog post about you gotta stop and smell the flowers when you didn't give yourself permission that day to even just have a nap because you were so freaking exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, especially if you're a life coach, yoga teacher, whatever, just somebody who really has this value of taking care of yourself, and then if you don't walk your talk, that has all kinds of other implications for you and other consequences because it makes you feel like you're not there yet. And that then has you feel like a fraud because you look at your life and go, oh, it just looks like a mess. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that I would go about, if you find yourself going, oh man, I think that's me, the way I would go about changing that would just be to figure out what's the one thing you always want to do and put off just for pleasure. For me, it was reading fiction books and baking. So those were the two things that I just started doing more. Figure out what that is for you and just figure out how you can either do that today, ideally, or just do it within the next 3 days and then go from there. Just have that intense desire to see it change and then just start playing with it, even when you feel like, I don't know if this is going anywhere. I can't really see how me baking cupcakes right now is doing anything spiritual for me or for my business. Just stick with it for a little while and see if you feel different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's something huge in there about listening to what you feel called to do. Like the baking cupcakes one is actually a great example because in the last sort of couple of years or so, I've really gotten into cooking and I really enjoy it. And I had a bit of an aha moment the other week because I'm working through the Artist Way at the moment. And Julia Cameron talks about how, cooking stuff is a form of creativity. And I kind of realized like that's exactly what it is for me. It's like an outlet for my creativity.
Mm.
And that brings me a lot of pleasure. Like I need creative time each day in order to feel, start feeling at least my pleasure quotient. So I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. And I think for for entrepreneurs on top of all this, you know, I just started doing something really, really small that's making a difference in how I feel. That was just to schedule an hour every day for eating lunch. Now, if you don't have, a boss or just a set framework that just tells you you have to have a break because that's the law, then you're likely going to eat your meals in front of your laptop, or you're just going to, go running around looking in the fridge and just going crazy. And that's like a really tiny thing for me to just put that on my calendar
Mm-hmm.
and then get a reminder email that's just says lunch and makes me remember, oh, right, I need to eat. Oh, right, I have an hour, not just like 15 minutes, like what I was usually giving myself for. I have an hour here to just make a salad or make something else. Just go create something that I find to be nourishing and delicious. And after that break, I just feel so much better going into any client calls I have or just, doing any kind of business stuff because I've just taken that little break in small tweaks because that's what it usually is. Usually it's the small tweaks, how they can make all the difference in how you feel, and that's really what I'm after. I
Mm.
want to have a better experience of my life. I just want to feel the way I want to feel more often than not, and that's usually the little tweaks that can get you there.
Yeah, I'm really, really glad that you brought this up. I mean, you brought up so much great stuff during this conversation already, but this is really big. And it goes back to something that you were saying close to the beginning, which is that it's not this all or nothing thing. We don't have to be either, working really hard or, if we're sort of like a parent or whatever, parenting really hard and like getting involved in that and work, 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 stress, 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 and then we take like a 3 week vacation or then we just like collapse on the couch for 3 weeks because we got really sick. Like it's not an all or nothing thing. And actually the way to do it in a sustainable way is to think, when you get up every day, like what is one way that I can add pleasure to my life today? What is it that I'm feeling really cool to do today? Whether that is just going for a walk at lunchtime, reading a bit of, a fiction book that you've wanted to read for ages, whatever it might be for you, creating something like doing a bit of painting or doing a bit of writing if that's what you feel called to do, but really learning to listen to that intuitive voice that's part of you that knows exactly what you want and exactly what you need. It's just a question of learning how to listen to it, but giving that space each morning to come up and say, actually, this is what's going to bring me the most pleasure today.
Yeah. When I really wanted to kind of up my pleasure game and also feel like I have more intention throughout my day, I started doing a little morning meeting with myself. And I got the idea from Mara Glatzel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very simple. You just take anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes in your morning, where I always did it just getting out my journal. And I asked myself, what do I need for myself today? So that's just, what's the basic self-care, checking in. How do I feel? Like, am I tired? Am I, full of energy? What is it that would help me feel just better about my day? That's also where the pleasure could come in. And then the other question was, what does my business need from me today? So it was this mini meeting that combined self-care with my work. Um, and then I could just, I had an intention for the both of those, and that made it so much easier to actually go and fulfill that intention. And also, as I was writing down the business stuff, I had in mind that I just shared, you know what, I'm actually really tired. I think I might need a nap today. So then, of course, I don't put on my calendar that day to, work for 6 hours straight. I might actually think about, okay, so I have a client call here, a client call there. Maybe I can get a half-hour nap time in here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic example of giving yourself space to listen to your needs each day. And I love that idea of a morning meeting as well.
Mm-hmm.
And, something else that I think is a really interesting point that comes out of what you just said is that work and play are not mutually exclusive. We often think of them
Yeah.
as very, very separate entities at sort of different ends of the pleasure continuum, right? But actually, you can combine them, and I would actually say that you need play in order to work properly. I was doing an interview with someone last week where they were kind of interviewing me about self-kindness, and they asked about boundaries and how, because the interview was specifically for people who are self-employed or who are wanting to be self-employed.
Mm-hmm.
And this person was asking about boundaries, and what about people who are in helping professions. And I was just thinking of it then because I think, what she was asking about also applies to, people who are parents or people who are caring for other people or people that have like a lot of external demands on them, people who give a lot in the course of their daily lives. And, what about those people? Like, how does self-kindness work there? Because surely, they feel this pressure to kind of be giving all the time. So what does self-kindness look like, and how do boundaries work in that sense? The way I think about it, and the response that I gave her was like, if you are in that position, whether it's through work or your personal life, if you give a lot as a person, you need to have boundaries around that giving so that while you're in a giving space, you really can give 100%. But outside of that space, in order to give 100% during those times, you need to have time for yourself, and that includes pleasure time as well. So I think that's really, really important, because I don't know about you, Iris, but I hear a lot of people, or I get a lot of people coming to me and saying, like, I'm just so busy, I have like all these commitments. And it's not always, but it's usually people that have kids especially, or people that are in, quote, healing professions, or person-centered professions, like whether that's counselors, coaches, therapists, those healers, practitioners, those kinds of people, that they do give so much, and they don't have that balance yet where they're putting boundaries around the giving, and they're recognizing that, okay, in order to give 100% during these times when I'm with my family or I'm with these clients or whatever the case may be, I need to also have this time in my life when I'm making space for myself and I'm taking the time to listen to that intuitive voice that you were talking about, and work out, what are my needs right now, what do I really want to do, what are my unmet needs as well, and how can I go ahead and meet those.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about, finding the space, because that's definitely,
Mm-hmm.
number one reason that people say they can have it, because they're just so busy and they don't
Mm-hmm.
have time. So let's talk about making time. Like, what do you do when you find yourself just going, I can't do this anymore, too much stuff to do, and I'm feeling just fried? So I think on a very practical level, one thing that I do with my clients is a commitment cleanse. So especially if you're one of those people who have a hard time saying things, that's a really good one. You pretty much just take a sheet of paper and write down all your commitments. That might be social commitments where, you said you were going to teach a yoga class for free. You were going to help out your friend with this and that. It could be recurring or just one-time things, just anything that you have on your plate, really, that has to do with other people. And you put all that down, and then you ask yourself, for each of those, you ask yourself first, do I want to do this? Does this give me energy? Does this nourish me? So that's the first thing to look at. And then if the answer is yes, cool, then it might, actually go into the bucket of things that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
If the answer is no, then look really closely. Do you really have to do this? Is this something that you have to do? And not just, based on the assumption, oh, she's going to hate me if I say I won't come to her wedding. But, do I have to do this because, it will really have serious consequences to my business. Do I really, really, really have to do this? And most of the time, the answer is not really. And then check in with yourself about how you feel about that. How would you feel if you could, not have that just disappear? Would you just have it disappear? And if the answer is yes, then really see how you can actually have it disappear. Either, just spend more energy into it, just say no, have a difficult conversation, but just doing those things and looking at what you can let go of. And just like you can do that with your commitments, you can also do that looking at your work life, for example, and just going, what are all the things that I feel I should do throughout the week? Let's say you are an online entrepreneur. I should guest post, I should blog post, I should have a Twitter or something, I should, figure out how to find clients, whatever it might be. And then, look at all those things and look at what do you actually like doing? Like what gives you energy? What inspires you? And then also look at what's actually working, especially with business. Do you know that this thing that you did right there actually got you clients? Where did you get your past clients? Did you get them from updating your Twitter, or did you get them from sending out a personalized email? And look at those things. Just looking at, I guess that's the grand theme here, is to look at all the shoulds in your life and see if there wants to. Do I want to do this? And then just starting to practice saying no to stuff, letting go of stuff. I would say that's the first thing you can do to start creating more wiggle room in your life pretty quickly.
Yeah, I love that suggestion, and I love the name as well, a commitment cleanse. Something that I encourage people to do is to notice the language that they're using as well, and this is really related to what you were just saying, but to notice when they're using the phrase, oh, I have to do X, Y, Z, and to reframe it as I choose to do X, Y, Z. Because when we say I have to do something and it's an obligation, what we're actually doing is taking away our choice and disempowering ourselves to make that choice, whether to do it or not. There's this sort of almost like, something external, some unseen external force has us in chains and it's like making us do this thing, when actually the case is that yes, there might be some complicated feelings around it, like we might have fears around letting people down or looking bad, or beliefs about ourselves that might be playing into it, but ultimately there are very, very few things in life that we absolutely have to do. Eating, sleeping, drinking, like very basic things that we need to do to stay alive. Yeah, those are things that we have to do. But again, within the scope of those things, there's many different ways that you can do those things, right? That when we think about, our day-to-day commitments, I found it really helpful, because I found myself slipping into this thinking as well, like, oh, I have to do X, Y, Z, and stopping and thinking, no, actually, I'm choosing to do this. Really helps me reframe it. And then think, well, okay, if I'm choosing to do this, why am I choosing to do it? And is this actually the right choice for me to do this thing right now, to do this thing today?
Yeah, and I think really with those have tos, like mostly they don't exist. Like when I find myself resisting something and I go, I have to because, let's say, the most common reason is probably because it makes me money, because it's my job, whatever, like those survival needs. You probably don't have to do that. You can, or if you find yourself going, oh, I just have to do it, find ways to make it a choice. Let's say for some reason you're really resisting your client calls throughout the week. What do you need to change? Is it just that they're on the wrong days? Are they too early in the morning? Are they scattered throughout your week? What is it about it that has you feel like it's this giant should and this thing that drains you of energy? And then look at what can you do to make it actually fuel you. Yeah. And a lot of the time, the tweaks are so simple. Like, for example, for me, I realized lately that my energy was just, I didn't have enough energy throughout the week. I felt pretty exhausted. So what I did was I just looked at, okay, what is taking my energy? Okay, I'm having so many amazing coaching calls, conversations, interviews, just stuff throughout the week, but it's a little too much and it's a little too scattered. So I just put some boundaries around when I accept which calls, and put a limit on myself, just to know, like, if I reach 10 conversations in a week, then that thing is going to go to the next week, and that's that. And if it doesn't fit in there, because we're already having 10 there, it can go to the week after. And it's so simple. And it's making all the difference in how I feel throughout my week because there is this sense of spaciousness again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everything that you're saying about working with clients and building a business there absolutely applies to, people who might be doing other things as well. It applies to different areas of life. It applies to your commitments in your personal life, activities or things that you might be doing there. I think it applies to relationships as well. Like if there are certain relationships that you're continuing like out of a sense of obligation, but are actually really, really draining you, I think it's really important to be able to give yourself permission, to acknowledge that and accept that and know that that is okay. Like if that's the response you're having, that's the response you're having. And then also to think, well, what do I want to do about this? Is there something about this relationship that needs to change or that I want to change in order for me to feel more energized about it? Is there a way that I can spend less time with this person or distance myself from them? But recognizing always that you have a choice and ultimately that your pleasure is your responsibility and it is something that you do have control over, even if it doesn't always feel that way.
Yeah. So one way that I kind of do a litmus test for myself, when I find myself saying and really believing I should do something or I have to, I need to, just any of that language, is to just rephrase it as I want to. And then going, is that true? Or am I just lying to myself here? Because it's really easy. Like if you say I want to do something and you actually don't, you just really clearly know you're lying to yourself. So that's my sign that that thing either needs to go, because I don't enjoy doing it, or that I need to find a way to make it more pleasurable for myself to do it. So that's a really, really easy way to just kind of look at your commitments, just watch out for your language, and just whenever you find yourself saying I should, replacing it with I want and seeing if that makes any sense, or if you're going, I don't want to do any of those things that I tell myself I should be doing.
I really love that suggestion. Thank you for sharing. And one thing I love about it is it also ties into what we were talking about earlier to do with learning to listen to that intuitive voice. And that's a huge part of it, is reframing something as I want to do this and then listening to that part of you that knows, yeah, I really do want to do this, or no, like I really, really don't want to do this. Because that part of you will always like make its feelings known, right? It's just a question of listening. And I guess to kind of wrap up, because I'm aware we've been going for a while now and, I could totally carry on, but I think maybe let's leave this for another conversation, another time, and kind of revisit this topic at some point. But just to wrap up, I think a huge part of permission and pleasure and all these things that we've been talking about today is really accepting how you feel and recognizing that for everything you feel, like there's a reason for it. And this is a huge thing that I talk about with clients, that I talk about a lot on my blog, is that, whatever you feel is okay, because there's always a really, really good reason for it. It might not be in the present. It might not be anything to do with the present situation. It might be something from your history. It could be, something to do with a conversation that you had with someone last week, or something you feel about yourself, some belief you have about yourself. Or it might very well be to do with the present situation. But like, there's always really, really good reasons for why you feel certain things, why you do and don't want to do certain things. And part of this process that we've been talking about, I think, is accepting that and learning to use that as, learning to really listen to your feelings as an indicator of what you're needing in your life, what's working for you, what's not working for you, and using that almost like a kind of, a guiding light or a map for getting to where you want to get to, which is, a life that is filled with pleasure, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think all of this really comes back to learning how to listen to your intuition. And I know in the beginning it can just seem like, okay, so I want to, but how do I do it? Like, what's the process? Give me the step by step. And I've actually done an interview on my blog about that with Natalia Shuklina, who's also a life coach and who really talks about intuition a lot. So maybe we can link that up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because we talk about all those beginners questions where you just go like, but how about this? What do I do if my intuition's not talking to me? How do I know it's my intuition and I'm not making all this up? But I would just say, as a starting point, just having that intention, just going, okay, I'm ready to listen now. I'm ready to listen to you. even though I don't know what you sound like, even though I don't know if anything's going to come up, but just having that intention and then just seeing if anything comes up. And another thing that you can do would be to just, create a little space for that, create a little, make sure there is a little wiggle room and ease in your life so that you actually can calm down and listen to your intuition. Because if you're running around in circles, especially when you're not used to listening to it, it can be really hard to know which of these 3,000 thoughts a second is your intuition and which one of them are just, chatter.
Yeah, I think a huge question for people is like, with inner critics, for example, like what's my intuition and what's just my inner critic? Like,
Yeah.
when am I being realistic and when am I being harsh? So I think that would be, maybe that's something that we can also talk about another time because that's a huge, huge question. And I'm not sure we have time to go into it now, unfortunately, but I would love to link to that article with all the other links that you've shared today as well. So Iris, if people want to find out more about you, where can they do that and what is the best way to get in touch?
So they can just go to my website, which is irisbarzen.com. Um, that's the easiest way where you can just read up all the stuff, find these articles if you want to go looking for them yourself. And then I would say the best way to reach me really is to email me. So if you have any questions about stuff that we talked about today, feel free to email me at iris@irisbarzen.com. And then I'm on social media too, but if you really want to get in touch, those two would be the best places to start from.
Cool, and I will share those links that you've just mentioned in the show notes with all the other lovely links. Thank you so much for today, Iris. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I mean, I've gotten a huge amount out of this conversation. I've really enjoyed being a bit experimental, chatting, going with the flow, and I hope it's useful for people watching or listening to this as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This just feels like one of these, like another conversation to add to the list of awesome conversations we had. So I'm
Yeah.
really glad that this time around we got to share it with other people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, thanks a lot, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Okay, bye.